Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of This Organized Life podcast. I am your host, Lori Palau, and we're going to be in for a treat because, well, I don't know. We'll see if it's a treat. I'm actually going to be just broadcasting solo this month. I am doing an entire series on our clutter clinics because summer's a great time where a lot of times people are going to embark on those projects that have been sitting on the back burner. And so I thought it would be great if we just did a deep dive each week on some actual, like, practical stuff to help get you organized room by room. You guys have been asking for it. I love talking about people's stories and people's journeys, but sometimes I think it's helpful to just kind of get into the nitty-gritty of organizing, which is how my business started and still what I'm super passionate about. And so I wanted to kick today off with, like, we're going in with the big guns. I figure let's start with garages. And so I want to just caution anybody, if you live in an apartment or you don't have a garage, you could still benefit from this because a lot of the strategies that we're going to talk about in terms of decluttering and organizing the garage relates to other areas. So it could relate to basements, it could relate to attics, it can relate to storage spaces. So any, like, large space that's multifunctional, you're going to want to lean into this because this is going to have lots of information. And I actually have my notes here because I wanted to, like, so anybody that's watching on YouTube, if you see me like looking down, it's because I am going to actually be reading some statistics and I'm going to be giving you specific action plans. So don't worry. Most people, if you're like me, you're listening to a podcast when you're multitasking, walking the dog, doing dishes, or cleaning, just organizing, or driving. But we'll put all of this information in our show notes on the podcast page. So you can download everything or go back and re-listen if you want to hear it again. So here we go. I want to get started. So the first thing that I want to talk about are some statistics. So I'm a data person. I'm a little bit of a data nerd. And to me, organization is so much emotion. There's a lot of emotion around clutter, but facts are really going to give you your honest, like, black and white information. And so I always like to couple the emotional part of clutter and organization with some statistical facts. So in terms of garage, 9% of Americans rent a storage space, even though 65% of those people have garages. So, in addition to having a garage, you are still renting additional storage spaces. And again, I don't know a lot about the rental storage space. I know we rented one for my older daughter when she was in college, like her first year of college, but you're talking wasting money. Like, literally, that's just wasting money for your stuff. Unless you're, like, in the middle of a move and you need, like, a temporary, like, here's a defined area. But most of the people that rent storage spaces, I don't have that statistic in front of me, but it's like 2 years or longer. So again, you're talking about not like this is a temporary situation. You're talking about this is an ongoing, we're just going to pay money to store our stuff because we don't know what to do with it. So just bear that in mind. Okay, second statistic. 50% of homeowners rate the garage as the most disorganized place in the house. That's a lot. Like, half of the people say that, and we're gonna dig into the why I think that is in the, like, when we move on. And but then the third statistic that I'm gonna throw at you today is when purchasing a home, 80% of the buyers factor in the garage as part of their decision-making process. And I think that's super interesting because and I watch, like, a lot of HGTV, so you see people constantly not, you see them going into the garage and whether they're going to use it to park their cars or they want to turn it into a portable gym or whatever they want to do, the garage is a really big factor when people are deciding. Yet a lot of times, and statistics will show, once they get the garage, it's treated as like an afterthought. It's treated not as part of the house. And I see that all the time when I'm working with people. I see it how they treat and look at whether it's investing the mental bandwidth to figure out how do I want to really utilize this space, as well as what they want to invest in terms of time and money for products to make this space a functional part of their house. So I think it's really interesting where that disconnect comes in. It's really important when we're deciding what we need. Like my girlfriend just bought a house and she was downsizing and she was like, it has a two-car garage. And then the two-car garage is just filled with a lot of stuff, and it's not really being utilized properly. So again, it's like, why do we want this space? Why do we want this garage? So we're gonna talk about that. Okay, so let's talk about some pitfalls of the garage. So anybody that's been around me knows that I talk about 5 main clutter pitfalls that can apply for any room in the house, any type of clutter, whether it's physical clutter, emotional clutter, or counter clutter. So in this case, we're talking about physical clutter, obviously. And just to run through them again, the 5 clutter pitfalls are procrastination, that whole I'll get to it later. Indecision, which is I don't know what to do with something, so I'm just going to not do anything because I don't want to be wrong. Guilt, which is that emotional component of somebody gave this to me, my kid made it for me, it cost a lot of money, that whole what if factor, what if I need it? So guilt, huge clutter pitfall. Overwhelm, which is I don't even know where to begin. There's just so much here that I'm not even sure what to do first. And then the fifth one is time to do it. I know what to do. I'm not emotionally attached to it. I just am so busy. I don't have the time to do it. And I think arguably the garage can really check each one of those boxes. So for many people, it's easy to procrastinate because you can just put stuff mindlessly in the garage and just shut the door and deal with it later. It doesn't impact the flow of your day to day. It's not like your kitchen or maybe some of the other rooms in the house. So a lot of times people can just throw stuff in the garage and just, again, we'll just deal with it another time. And again, this can translate to an attic or a basement as well. Indecision, that I don't know what to do with something. Well, I'll just stick it in that extra space. So that whole indecision piece, huge there. Guilt, again, we see this from my basement might flood. I need to keep extra sump pumps. So that extra stuff, that whole what if, the apocalypse, we see that a lot for the garages when I go into garages. Or I might move, that whole like, what if I move? And I've lived in my house forever and I have tons of boxes. Or what if I need that computer box that's like ginormous? Like, do you know how many empty boxes I've found in garages? So think about these things. That's really out of like that guilt, fear, that indecision, and then that comes into that guilt and fear. And then moving into that overwhelm piece, when you're looking down the barrel of a garage that you have trouble walking through, or even if it's like the perimeter is piled from floor to ceiling, that overwhelm is understandable. And I get it. And without a strategy, and we're going to talk through it, so don't, we're going to figure out a plan of attack, but without having that clarity of this is how I'm going to, eat an elephant one bite at a time, it is completely overwhelming and really difficult to say, how can I carve out time, which is the fifth clutter pitfall? How can I manage or utilize my time wisely so that I can say, this is how I'm going to address this problem? So that is what I want to cover today. couple of the other things where garages in particular stress people out is, again, we talk about the volume. There's just a lot of stuff, and it's very easy to accumulate in a garage. And especially if a garage doesn't have a lot of existing systems like shelving units or what have you, it's really easy because stuff just continues to literally pile up. And that's a problem. That's a problem for a lot of people. It's a problem for storage and it's a problem for retrieval because when you just have stuff thrown randomly about, it's really difficult to find what you're looking for. So even if you know you have it, it's that ease of retrieval piece that makes it really difficult and stressful. And that's when you find a lot of people go, it's easier for me to just go to the store and buy it again, and I hear this all the time with people where I know it's here somewhere, but it's going to either take me longer to go look for it and it'll just be easier for me to just go run out and buy fill in the blank. Another reason why garages are really kind of like a beast when it comes to the organizing world is it's a multi-zone space. For most people, the garage serves more than one purpose. So you think about it. For some people, it might be where they store their tools, as well as their car supplies, as well as gardening supplies. It could be some overflow pantry items or like dry goods. It could be a sports zone for kids. So, I mean, there's a lot of different purposes for the garage. And so when you are looking at a space that's multi-purpose, again, whether it's a garage or like a basement or someplace else that is doing like a lot of different things, one of the things we're going to talk about is clearly defining the zones, not just what the zones are, but where they're going to live and how that makes sense in how you use it. Like, for example, you're not going to want to put a kid's sports zone all the way in the back corner where they have to kind of walk through tools and gardening supplies. You're going to want to put it where it's easily accessible for them to get their stuff and put their stuff back. So again, we're going to talk about that. So the zones is really important. Another reason why garages can easily become a big melting pot is because it's a high traffic area for a lot of people. And this actually can go one of two ways. It's either not trafficked at all. So if you have a detached garage, like I know in our old house, we had a detached garage that was kind of like at the back of our property. And so it kind of got forgotten. Like we would go out there to put stuff that we didn't want to deal with. And so it was forgotten. But on the flip side, my house now, we have an attached garage and that goes into our mud room. So that is the main point of entry for us. So you can look at both ends of the spectrum of either it's not getting trafficked at all or it's getting trafficked a lot. And both of those extremes can add to the clutter problem. Okay. The fifth one that I want to talk about is the lack of products. Now, again, anybody that's been around me knows I'm not a product pusher. I don't think products are going to necessarily solve your problem a lot of the time. For most people, it's a volume issue. Like volume is your first problem for most people. Okay, not all, but most people. I always say, and I will say this again with the garage as well, is address your volume problem first because you don't know what products you need until you know what you're actually dealing with. And so many times people have bought products, whether they've seen them, on the end cap at a store, or they've seen an advertisement or a commercial or whatever it is, and they think that this product is going to solve their problem. And I always say products are great if they're used the way that you need them, like if they'll function the way that you need it, the way that it's going to make sense for you. And I've seen a lot of times, I mean, the organizing product world is like a multi-billion dollar industry. And it's that way for a reason. People are always trying to find like the quick fix, the problem solver. And it really comes down to behavior, routine, all of those things, those kind of non-sexy things. And then the products are going to help you with that. They're going to make it easier for you. And actually, I told this story like years and years and years ago when I first started my business. I was helping my girlfriend organize. It was my first big project that I did, and I organized her garage. She had 4 kids, or she has 4 kids, and I helped her organize her garage in preparation for a move. And the first thing, and she had tons of stuff. She lived in her house for like 15 years, and she had 4 kids, and there was a lot of stuff. And the first thing she said is, "What products are we going to buy? What are we going to buy?" And it was not fun for her. And we talked about, I said, "Sorry, we're going to get to the products, but that's like, that's your carrot at the end. We got to go through the purging and the sorting and all of that stuff first." And that's always my recommendation for people before they buy products. But products will come into play in a garage. And I think that they definitely, when you're looking at where you're going to utilize products in a garage, the good news is you have tons of flexibility depending on the size of your space and the kind of the layout of your space. You can use all kinds of nooks and crannies and walls and nooks and ceilings with wall mount, with ceiling mount, loft systems. There's so many options available for you to create space that wasn't there. And so that's what I love about garages, is the possibilities can really be endless. So I think it's important, though, because they are endless, that you really get dialed in on what your goals are before you dig in and invest in anything. All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to come back and I'm going to give you a ton of practical tips. So sit tight. Okay. So I came up with a list of 10 garage tips. Now, obviously, there's more, but these are 10 really key tips for getting started. If this is a space that has been stressing you out, or maybe you have a parent that's downsizing and they've been in their house for many years, like this is a great strategy for you to look at for yourself or somebody else. Okay. So, number 1, identify how you want the space to function. Meaning, do you want to park cars in there? Do you need tool storage? Do you need a sports zone? Are we going to store seasonal items? How and what is the purpose of this space? A lot of times the garage is just kind of like, it's assumed or implied, but it's not really dialed in. And once you can dial in of like, what is the purpose that I need this to serve? What are my hobbies? What are my interests? Are you somebody that are you a real outdoorsy person? Do you have a lot of fishing poles? Do you need to find fishing storage? Do you go to the lake? Do you have a boat? Do you have boat related products? Are you somebody that goes to the beach? Do you have tons of beach related stuff? Think about the way that you live and how you want your space to function. So that's the first thing, is think about what needs to live in this garage. That's number 1. Number 2 is assess the space that you have to work with, meaning you can use walls, you can use ceilings. What are you keeping on the floor? I actually do think that there are some things that belong on the floor, which surprises a lot of people. I try to get as much off the floor as possible. But again, I like to think about the ease of retrieval when I'm talking about organizing any space. And so when it came to when my kids were younger, I'm actually a big fan of having like a standing portable bike rack for bikes. A lot of people like to hang them from the ceilings, or from the wall. And I think that's awesome. But I wanted my kids to be able to get their bikes and put them away. And what happens is, when a lot of times people will store them, from a ceiling mount or whatnot, it it aesthetically looks really pretty, but then it doesn't empower or enable the kids to be able to get them themselves or put them away. It makes it really difficult. So think about, how much is it going to bottleneck you the way that you're setting up your space. So that's really important. Don't just think about the aesthetic, think about the aesthetic married with the function. And that's really important for garages. And again, for some people, the materials are really important. So my garage is drywall, so I can easily put stuff in. I may have to use some anchors if it's not going to a stud, but drywall's pretty easy material. But if you live in an old home, you may have cement walls, you may have plaster walls, you may have old heating elements. I have a client where the garage is an old garage and there's all this piping and it's plaster. And so it's not as easy for me to just put something up on a wall. It makes it a little bit more challenging. So look at the space that you have, the height of your ceiling. Do you have any cutouts that you can add shelving? How often are you going to need to get this stuff? Is it like seasonal stuff that you're getting once a year? Or is this, I'm putting all of the stuff for our lake or our beach house up really high, but we go every week. So I think you need to think about how often you're going to need it, how often you're going to need to retrieve it, and what you're working with. Okay, number 3. If you have a lot of stuff, it's really important to prepare for the disposal of these items. Whether that means you need to rent a dumpster, but a lot of times people don't really need a full dumpster. They just need one of those like dumpster bags, which most garbage companies now have them, where you could just call like whoever your Republic Waste Management, whoever your local garbage company is, and tell them that you're going to be doing a clean out. And most of the disposal companies will have some sort of like big bulk storage or big bulk removal system that you can either buy or rent. So that's what I would do. So I would be prepared. As much as it's funny, people will prepare all the time when it comes to organizing products, but they don't necessarily prepare when it comes to the decluttering products of what you need to have on hand to make that process easier. So the first thing you do is make sure that you have an area or a receptacle to get rid of all of the trash and recycling. And the same with the donate, which leads me to the next one. I always recommend having bins, or if you have old boxes that you want to use, but I just use my clear, like large Sterilite bins. And again, this isn't a plug for Sterilite. This is totally editorial. But getting them and to use to categorize different things. So it's nice to corral, and this kind of gets into the strategy of when you are sorting, and we're going to talk about this, your items. You can start to zone them like with like. So you can put them, all as you're getting it, you could put all of the gardening stuff in one bin. You could put all of your tools or paint supplies or whatever it is in one bin, but you can also designate areas. So whether if you're like utilizing your driveway, I would have one section for your relocate pile. And again, we're going to get into that. So space it out so that it's easy when you are sorting the stuff, when you actually get into the nuts and bolts of like we're diving in, you have a plan of where this stuff moves to. Because a lot of times people take it out, but then they don't know what to do with it. And that's where that kind of indecision and overwhelm piece. So let's talk a little bit about my 4 piles. So I talk about this in my Clutter Clinic series. I talk about it in the book, and I just talk about it with my clients. So here you go. The 4 piles that I work with, and I use this for any space, so you'll hear it again when we're going through the other Clutter Clinic series, are keep, which is the stuff that you want to keep in this space. So it's not just keeping it, period. We're keeping it in this rotation in this space. The second one is your donate pile. So that's anything that's good and usable, but you are not going to be using it and you want to pay it forward. And that means you're donating it to a charity. It means you're donating it to a friend, whatever it is. Donate is a separate pile. So you've got your keep, you've got your donate. Then you've got your recycle pile, which is your trash. So you're going to be recycling responsibly of the stuff that you are no longer using. And then the fourth pile is your relocate pile. And garages, this is a really big one because there's probably stuff that's in your garage that you want to keep, but doesn't need to live there. And so, because the garage has just naturally become kind of like a dumping ground. So, whether you're saying this just randomly got thrown here, or maybe you have stuff that you're storing a particular category in the garage, but you realize, you know what? I don't really need to store that there. For example, let's say you were storing, I don't know, party supplies in your garage, but you decided, you know what? There's really a space in my basement that I could store party supplies, or I've got, an extra shelf in the kitchen that I can store these platters and pitchers. I don't know. I'm just making that up. But that's what you're going to want to think about, the relocate pile. What are the things that we want to keep, but they don't need to live here? So those are your four piles. So what I would do, and what I have done with garages, is I try to utilize the driveway as the staging area. So I kind of pick like four sections for each one of them. And obviously, if you're the relocate, or I'm sorry, the recycle pile, if you do have a dumpster or some sort of receptacle, that can go directly in there. And that's that zone right there. But you want to keep them separated so that you don't get confused when you're going to put everything back. You don't want to accidentally put something that's going the relocate pile back in because it wasn't clearly defined and separated. So that's kind of, you want to kind of pick your four corners, is what I would say. Then the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have your bins with your doing your like with like. And your bins, again, like I said, you want to just put all your categories together. So anything that's maybe outdoor play, maybe your kids have sidewalk chalk and you've got some scooters and you've got some outdoor games and balls and bats and whatever it is, that is all going to be in one area. That's going to be your kids zone or your sports zone. And then maybe you keep outdoor shoes or whatever. You're going to have that as a specific area. So you have all of these mini zones. So once you can eliminate the stuff that's going into either recycle, donate, or relocate, now you have to figure out with this existing keep pile, how are we laying out the space? And that's going to be determined by what the categories are, how frequently you're going to access them. Like, let's say you have, a tool bench thing, but you don't do a ton. Maybe it can be like all the way in the back, so it's not in the way. But again, like I said, you're going to want your kids' sports stuff up towards the front because they're constantly going in and out of the garage. Maybe you want to store seasonal stuff, but you really only need it once a year. So that's going to be some shelving against a back wall up high, or maybe that is a ceiling loft system. So you just know that once a year you get up on the ladder, you get your Christmas stuff down, you get your Halloween stuff down, whatever it is, and then you don't have to climb back up and forth. So I think it's important to say, what's my volume of stuff? How often do I need it? What makes the most logical sense? And then from there, you can also decide what am I going to need here? Am I going to need shelving? Am I going to need wall mount hooks? What am I going to need that is going to um, allow me to see and access what I need? And I always tell people, listen, I don't want you to spend money unnecessarily, but if you are going to be investing in like larger latched plastic Sterilite bins, again, basic things, you don't ever want to have boxes. You don't want to store any contents in like corrugated boxes because mold, wetness, moisture, critters, any of the things. So you always want to store any of that kind of stuff in anything you're going to be keeping in a lidded, and I prefer the latched Sterilite bins because it allows you to kind of keep everything outside. It really makes a huge difference. And if you are going to be doing it, I like clear so I can just see inside. Even though I label things, it's so much better and easier to just give a quick bird's eye view and go, okay, that's all my Christmas stuff. That's all my Halloween stuff without having to worry about it. And so that's my recommendation. If you already have a ton of bins and they are colored already, they're, blue, black, green, red, whatever, that's fine. I'm not saying you have to invest in all new bins, use what you have. But if you are going to go out and purchase new ones, then I would recommend using clear storage bins. It just takes the guesswork out of it, eliminates one brief little step. Um, this is a really big one. So once you have done that and you figured out what your systems are, I think you also have to figure out what your budget is. There's a lot of really inexpensive ways that you can organize your garage. Again, these are all like non-paid sponsorships. These are just products that I've used, that I like, that I trust. Um, Organized Living is a great track and rail mount system. I love them. I use them for closets. I use them for garages. They've actually been a sponsor. They're not currently sponsoring us, but they have been a sponsor. I love them. I have them in my garage. It's great. I have a whole back wall with seasonal bins up there. And then they also have these like closed lockers that are also on the track and rail. And inside the lockers, I have organized bins of, one is like household stuff with, um, like outside, like caulk and spackle and things like that, like kind of household stuff. I've got one for car, I've got one for garden. So I have all these bins inside this closed locker. So you're not seeing it. And then they have a wall mount thing that you could hang tools off of. I have a couple, like I have a garden hose not a hose. I have a extension cord and I've got some garden tools that I use on the regular, like clippers and stuff that I just hang on there. So it's a quick grab and go. And this is a great system. You can also, another one of my big fan favorites, and this is what I used for all my kids' sports stuff, and I also use this in my shed, which is Rubbermaid's Fast Track system. And you can get that online. You can get it at Home Depot and Lowe's, any of the big box stores. They sell the Fast Track system. And so I think it's great because you can change out the components. I love these because they just screw right into the wall in a stud. And you can anchor them in if it's not going into a stud, and you could just, it takes everything up off the floor and you can mount them wherever you like and put on whatever components you like. So those are my go-tos. I absolutely recommend them to everybody. But then of course, if you wanted to do like a really high-end garage, there's tons of companies that come in and do that for you. And they can design your garage floor to ceiling, however you like. But what I tell people all the time is, go through this exercise first. If you want to do that, that's fine, but have an idea of how you want your space to function, because these garage companies are not designed to necessarily go through all of this with you. Figure out how you're using it. What do you need to declutter? They're here to sell you products. And that's their business. And there's nothing wrong with that. But just know that their goal isn't necessarily to help you get decluttered and organized the way that I want you to get organized. Their goal is to have these products that will help you, but they're actually just looking at your existing stuff. So not every business, I think there's a lot of great companies out there, but you still need to put in the work to go through all of this to figure it out before you invest in product, whether that's DIY product or hiring a company to do that. And then once it's all done, once you put it back, right? So you get rid of the donate, you get rid of the recycle, you've moved the relocates to where they belong. Now you have to put that keep back in, and you're going to put them in with the proper storage, shelving, baskets, a loft system, whatever you need. Once it's all back, that's great. But like anything, you're going to maintain it. And especially in garages, because a lot of times we're talking about cycling things out seasonally, at least where I live. I live in the Northeast and I don't have a huge garage. We do have a little shed on the side of our garage, which is super helpful. So I know in the winter, I have a snowblower and shovels out in my garage, and in my shed, I've got, my lawnmower and gardening stuff. And then I flip it seasonally. So think about how you're using your stuff. And when you go in, especially if you do live in a geographic area that has seasons, set reminders, mark it on your calendar. I recommend doing it every 6 months. I think 6 months is enough. Once you've got your system set up, if you set up the system to work for you, it should be fairly easy to maintain so that when you go in there to do kind of your 6-month clean out, it's not as overwhelming as it was the first time because so much you've already eliminated and you've set up a better system to work with. So your foundation is much better. But what happens is a lot of times people will do it and then they'll go, it's done, and just kind of check it off the list and not go back and tweak and enhance and clean out and streamline. And that's really what you need to do. So my recommendation is to do it every 6 months, preferably. If not, do it once a year. If you're like 6 months is too much, I don't have the time, or it's overwhelming for me, set a reminder, do it every spring or every summer. I always think May, June's a great time, depending on where you live, because it might not be too hot. But for some people, it might be the fall. I mean, again, think about what makes sense for you to do it. And our friends in Australia, you're going to be doing it opposite of us because, your seasons are opposite of ours. So I think it's just a matter of figuring out, when does the maintenance look good for me? When does that work in my life? And the final tip that I have is garages are they're a big task. And especially when you're starting, it is very easy to get overwhelmed, even for somebody who's super organized. So to try to make it fun, I try to find the fun in any type of an organizing product. I say get a buddy. If you're not going to hire a professional, I mean, obviously, if you want to hire a professional, of course, that's like a no-brainer. And we've got a ton of our great, talented professional organizers all over. So make sure you check out all of our partners if you're looking for a professional organizer. But if you are saying, I'm going to do this on my own, whether you're doing it with your spouse, you're doing it with your kids, you're doing it with a girlfriend, whatever it is, get a buddy to help you. Not only does it help you with the physical heavy lifting, but it also gives you someone to bounce ideas off of. And it gives you somebody to kind of talk through the process. I think it's really helpful to talk through the process as you're going along. I talk through the process all the time, and I've been doing this for years, and I still talk it out. So I think there's something to be said of having somebody alongside with you to help you navigate. Even if it's somebody that's just, I'm passing it to you and telling you where to go, and you put it in the different piles. Just having somebody there, it makes the time go quicker and it makes the process seem less overwhelming. So those are my 10 tips for the garage. We're going to take one more quick break. And when we're going to come back, I'm going to give you just a last few minute call to actions and some direction. So sit tight. All right, guys, I know I threw a ton of information out at you. If your head's not swimming right now, I'm happy. This whole process as I was going through this was to really hopefully break this down into digestible steps so that people felt it was doable. Because again, so much of the whole decluttering process is mental that we just feel like we don't have a plan. So what I was hoping to do is give you guys a plan and a starting point. Okay. So if you're motivated, obviously, like I said, check out our links in our show notes below when you click on the link, whether it'll be in YouTube or on the website or in your podcast app. It'll have all the lists of everything that we talked about here. The second thing is we have a downloadable free checklist on our website for garage downloadable tips. Some of them are the same, some of them are different, but you can go there. It's a free checklist. We'll have that link to that, excuse me, also in our show notes. The next thing is I want you to make a shift. And this is always like the harder part because this is kind of that mental shift, is treating your garage like part of the house. And we talked about this a little bit at the top of the hour, how when people are buying a home, they factor in the garage. It's like has a lot of importance. It's like a big part of the decision-making process, but yet we get it and we kind of treat it like an afterthought. So I want you to think about the way that we treat our garage, meaning, are we just throwing stuff randomly? Would we do that in other parts of our house? And a lot of times people treat the garage as the afterthought. And I want you to start thinking about this as an extension of your home, the way it really truly was designed to be. And if you can make that mental shift, that is going to impact your physical behavior, whether you just put something there mindlessly, or you don't put it back where you got it from, or you just pile stuff up aimlessly. So just think about it as this is another room of my home. And the third thing I want to do is I want to encourage you. I think there's so much that we all can benefit from validation and motivation from seeing other people. And so post your before and after pics, or if you don't even want to post your before pics, post your after pics. Do it for yourself, right? Because I think it's really important to see that progress. So I encourage you, anybody do before and after pics for yourself, but tag us on social media, wherever you are, tag Simply Be Organized. That's what we are. You could just show us your garage pics. If you're in our Facebook group, This Organized Life podcast, post your pics in there. If you have questions about what to do with a specific space, like you're not sure what product is best, go ahead, head on over into our Facebook group, and we're happy to answer, whether it's myself, one of my team members, or just another member that might have a great solution. Head on over there. Garages don't have to be the dumping ground. I think a lot of times we grew up in an area or a time where we felt our garages were a mess, and that's where they're destined to be, and disorganized. It doesn't have to be. And it doesn't always have to look like a Pinterest picture, but there is that middle ground. And that is where I think that we should aim to at least have that place where we feel good about the garage door being open. So that's it for this week's episode of This Organized Life podcast. I hope you enjoyed our first installment of our Clutter Clinic series. Next week, we're going to be back. We're going to be talking about closets. And I'm starting to lose my voice from talking for like almost an hour. So we're going to be back talking about closets. So post your questions. Love talking about closets. I think they're great. They're a lot of people's dirty little secret. So we're going to dive right into that. And again, if you're not following us already, follow us on social, follow our podcast. We're everywhere. You get podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast, wherever. And tell a friend if you like this show. We love new people, and our numbers are showing that you guys are out there listening each and every week, and we appreciate it. So until next week, I'm Lori Plow, and I hope everybody has a great July 4th. Peace out.